the Myrie Jane Podcast Network, and we got a great special guest joining us right now, a professional and in his industry. I'm gonna make him, introduce himself to the people.
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Jason Hadley. I am a health and safety applications manager for Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions, our
Mhm.
health and safety division. And what we do is we help facilities effectively control mold and contamination.
Mm.
My company's rooted in like the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry, so like a lot of clean room and stuff like that, like where like pharmaceuticals and
Mm.
vaccines are made, those types
That's
of
big,
conditions. Yeah,
very
it's
big.
huge. It's huge. And so they hired me on because I had growing experience and I had
Hmm.
been doing sales and other like lighting and automation for a few companies and what have you. And so it turns out they're like, well, you know how to talk to growers and you know all the pain points. We can teach you everything that you need to know about how to control mold and contamination, and let's set you loose. And so uh, I basically work with a lot of growers on when it comes to equipment and when it comes to education.
Oh,
So from the equipment side, I sell filter, which is this here. Sorry, my nails are painted. I'm a
yep.
girl
It's all
dad,
right.
and
It's all right.
like
I know. I
I'm a
know.
present father. What can I
I
say?
know. I know. I know that.
Anyway, so filter is the way to basically remove particles from the space, like mold spores, dust, those
Hmm.
types of things that can lead to contamination. Behind me here, you got a handheld particle counter and an air sampler directly underneath it. Those are ways to be able to measure what's going on in the air. So
Hmm.
ultimately, what it comes down to, and like what I talk to a lot of growers about, is like what they're doing in like pharmaceutical manufacturing and what they're doing in like food manufacturing. If you took those two industries, like a little bit from each one of those industries, and put it into your own facility, your
Hmm.
facility would operate so much cleaner on the
Hmm.
front end that you wouldn't be all stressed out. Like a lot of people get really religious when like COAs come up. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you gotta, right? You're like really hoping that you pass, and it's like, listen, pill factories, spaghetti sauce factories, they deal with product contamination too,
And
right?
wineries. I used to work for one.
Wineries, yeah,
Yep.
exactly, right. So
Hmm.
in that process, there's a lot of stainless steel that's used, for example, in
Yep.
those facilities. Um, a lot of like sanitizing
Hmm.
processes and stuff are used. I mean, everything down to like even how the grapes are grown,
Yep.
and trying to maximize it and express all of the genetics you're trying to get out of them, like
I
flavor
seen a lot of
profiles
mold.
and yeah, right, exactly. So I'm just basically trying to tell these growers like you don't necessarily have to wait for like a landmine to go off in the middle of your operations. Like cannabis just as an industry compared to other mainstream manufacturing, like cannabis doesn't have breakage. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like when you go like at a winery, for example, not every grape is going to end up in the bottle.
Hmm.
And not every bottle is going to make it into a case, right? Accidents happen, the production line breaks or something like
Yep.
that. A filling station goes down. So, like, but wineries and other like industries that manufacture stuff, they factor that into their costs. Like in cannabis, like every crop needs to be banging, right?
Hmm.
Because like think about how many millions potentially you're in for like a commercial, property, for example,
Yep. Yep.
and like you're starting on day one trying to fight back to get into the black. Like you start in the red for like 6 months to a year, and now you're racing, right?
Hmm.
So you need every crop to count. So that's where a lot of this comes into play. And food and pharma, what they do, just it translates really well into cannabis.
And I know that I have some knowledge of your industry because I worked in industry what has to deal with like maintenance of areas,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Right.
for example, now how you probably hit it big business when it was around 4 years ago, that COVID
Oh yeah,
time,
yeah.
because I
Well,
know a lot
with
of
our air,
places
yeah,
needed
with
to
our
be
air
clean.
purifiers, right?
Hmm.
With our air purifiers for sure. Now, but cannabis, like if you have to answer to state microbial compliance, like to get onto a retail shelf, you
Yes.
know, like you need this type of equipment in place. You just would rather be able to see it while it's still in the air and still in your imagination,
Before,
and
yeah.
just yeah, before you start to see it on a wall or a plant or whatever, right? So a lot of like for instance, we found each other on Instagram, and
Hmm.
on my Instagram page, like I try to post like pretty much all like mold and microbe control tips. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And suggestions, and yeah, I gotta kind of put a dick joke in there to like help,
Yeah.
sneak the broccoli into the mac and cheese,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But no, but I mean, all of everything that I post is true. I mean, I since I started working with Filter, I actually went and got certified
Hmm.
for pharmaceutical CGMP. I have a HACCP certificate now. It's like I get that like it's not the sexiest part of the industry,
But it is a
right?
big part of the industry. Like
Right.
right now, I know because I look on the big picture. I would say the big picture. And
Yeah.
if you're doing this industry like food or anything similar, like food deals with plants and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Vegetables and stuff. You
Right.
have to have the proper what they say cleaning maintenance
Like
of the
protocols and
protocols, right?
yes.
So I'm gonna
Right.
ask
It's
you, how's the business going right now, like for what you do with the cannabis? Because I know cannabis in
yeah.
America is not fully legal, but it's becoming a trend of people legalization and people, industries are slowly coming, like compared
Right.
to where I'm from. I'm in Canada right now. So
Right. Okay. So you answer to Health Canada, right? And
mhm,
Health Canada specifically states that like facilities have to be CGMP certified, and um,
mhm.
like there's like no fuckery allowed. You know what
Yes,
I
yeah,
mean? Like you know what I'm
yes,
saying? Like there you are, that is the deal, the Faustian bargain that you made
yeah,
with the government, where
yeah.
like okay, you can operate out in the open, but
Mhm.
now you have to make this medicine the way medicine's actually made.
Yes, exactly. You're right.
Ultimately, I mean,
Yeah.
the only reason pharma, in my opinion, at least, this is just my opinion, but one of the only reasons I think that pharma never really got into cannabis, like on the cultivation side, was because they're not into whole plant solutions. They like tinkering with molecules.
Mm.
So that's where I tell people, I'm like, and you see all these rumblings around Schedule 3, and like the industry is just going to continually morph, right? And so I
Mhm.
tell a lot of my growers, I'm like, here's the deal, man. If you could get up to a CGMP spec, even if you're
Mhm.
not mandated by it by your local like
Yeah.
cultivation state, jurisdiction, whatever, even if you're not mandated to it, like if pharma ever comes knocking, because here's what I think they're going to do, is this again just my opinion,
Mhm.
but they're not necessarily going to waste all this time opening up their own facilities, I think, as much as they'll start looking for facilities to contract their product.
Yeah. And
You know what I
I'm
mean?
going to say this to you. I appreciate your knowledge, and it's very important for my knowledge of cannabis and
Yeah.
other stuff. I do research because I have more than this podcast, right? This is my
Right.
baby podcast.
Sure.
What you do is very, very, I'm going to put this important.
Yeah.
If you want to even run any cannabis business,
Right.
what's legally, you need the filtration, you
Yeah.
need the maintenance, or if you don't have that, it's
Yeah.
considered the black market. It's like, no,
Right.
you ain't
Right.
going through.
Well, and that's the thing too, is it's like, okay, so there are a lot of growers in the legal industry that came from the legacy markets, right?
Yes.
So like I grew during like sort of the gray market period, where it wasn't
Mm,
quite illegal but it wasn't quite fully legal.
yeah.
So I didn't have to meet maintenance or microbial compliance, and my grow was like a Dr. Seuss built grow. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
could get away with it back then, but now, like, again, you have to operate a business the way businesses are operated, and sometimes that means paperwork and compliance. And so, okay, like, yeah, I had to stop growing because I didn't want to be a guy saying, hey, don't hire home growers, and then here I am growing at home, walking and touring your facility. I can't
Hmm.
do that anymore. You know what I mean? Like, those days are done now. Because I recognize my threat. You know what
Yes.
I mean? As an outsider coming in,
I
and
know.
and right, and ultimately, like, here's the thing. I mean, you're not growing something with a washable skin. You know what I
Mm.
mean? You're not growing a cucumber, you're not growing a tomato. And
Mhm.
even tomatoes and cucumbers, when you buy them from the supermarket, it's still advised that you wash them prior to
Yes,
eating them,
yes,
right?
yes. I know that
Right.
industry too.
Right. But, but
Mm,
with cannabis, you're
mm.
basically as I always tell my clients, you're growing flypaper that gets you high.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because it's like it's growing in a room, it's got an adhesive surface to it. Anything that is floating about in your air, like that makes contact with it, will adhere and deposit on that
Yes.
surface. And, now it might not be a mold spore that attacks a living plant like a botrytis. It could be like a mold spore from a species that won't start going to work until after the plant's been chopped, like an
Hmm.
aspergillus, a lot of those aspergillus species are like they're recyclers, right? In
Hmm.
nature, they break down dead animals and dead plants to
Yeah.
return it to the forest floor. So and so, you know, just because like mold came up in the dry room doesn't mean that the dry room is the problem.
I
So
like what you said. I said I appreciate your knowledge because you came to the right guy when it comes to this content
I love
podcast
it.
ish. Because and I'm all into the education with it, right? Really
Yeah,
that's my
I
entertainment. So I'm gonna give you this now. So
sure.
all the stuff that you've been given, we're making history right now. I'm just gonna enlighten you with this because I'm from Canada. You're
Hmm.
American.
Yeah.
And for us having this conversation is a good thing because we have already system already. It's already out there. They tell you
Hmm.
what it is. And America, I know there's certain place legalization is going on or whatever the developments, but it's still not fast enough, right?
No.
If I could
Right.
give you some knowledge of our system, I don't know if you know what happened in Canada with in
No. How did
regards
it
to
get there?
cannabis. So, boy, you're gonna get the meat now.
Yeah.
So
School me.
what happened is when I was because my father he's about he's in the 80s, and how I got influenced, I have to say my father's a cannabis smoker from
Hmm. Way
before me,
back.
from like way back,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
From
Right.
the hippie times, or you get what I mean, from those hippie times. So when he
Yeah.
came to Canada, because my parents are from Jamaica, right? He came to Canada. He really started to smoke more, like in the 70s and shit. And
Hmm.
then as we got older, he started to grow it too. So he was growing it outside, right?
Hmm.
So when you're talking to a guy who basically is in the blood, like people would say,
Yeah.
I was born from this.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
he taught me a lot of this stuff. He still grows right now. Now we're allowed to grow four plants, right?
Okay.
It got legalization in 2018, right?
Hmm. Right.
2018. But when I was growing up, it was illegal. And I'll tell you my age because I'm not scared to say my age. I'm 40. I just turned 45.
Yeah. Happy
So,
belated birthday.
yeah. So when I was growing up, there's
Uh-huh.
some guys who are paranoid. But if you had a criminal record more, you would be more paranoid because if they catch you with whatever, right? But it still wasn't as strict as what we seen in America. I used to watch movies and said, "Fuck, I'll never be there." Right here, what
Yeah.
happened is if you had a bad record, you'll get some type of time. But if you were a guy who never had a record, you
Yeah.
probably have to do community service. And then when it came to the 2000s, right? Because I was
Yeah.
in my 20s in the 2000s, they start giving tickets,
Hmm.
$75 tickets. So if they found you with it, either they'll throw it out. There's stories. I know the stories. Cops would just take it. They didn't
Yeah.
want to bring you because it's too much paperwork, and they'd
Right.
throw it out or they'll keep it for themselves. Because my friend, right?
Hmm.
Bless up to my friend, my Italian friend who I grew up with, right?
Hmm.
He told me the other side how he marijuana, like his experience, and we experienced it together. But the cops would just take his weed,
Hmm.
and they
Wow.
wouldn't charge. I think he
Yeah.
got one ticket, right? But the thing it was relaxed in Canada, like the weed
Yeah.
thing. They said it was illegal, but it wasn't like I never got in trouble for weed. I'm telling you that. I never got in
Yeah.
trouble
Yeah.
for weed. So it's a stereotype what lasted, black, for example, and they tell you, oh, that's what for me, being in Canada, I'll
Yeah.
tell you the experience. Being black, the stereotype what we see in America, for example.
Oh yeah.
The
Oh
police
boy.
would use that shit that's why I don't even have a record, right? The guys
Yeah.
who do
Right.
have records though, imagine them paranoid
Yeah.
extra shit, right?
Oh yeah. Right.
So what happened is now it went to the suburbs, right?
Uh-huh.
and a lot of the suburban kids starting to get these ticket, like charged.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the suburban kids, their parents are lawyers, if not judges,
Yeah.
doctors. So there's a
Right.
big population of that getting right from all
Right.
different cultures up here. They're getting it. The police was pulling over all types of people with that shit. So
Mm-hmm.
then from that now they legalized it. The first premier, we had a couple premiers, what you call a president, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
when I was growing up, as I was in my 20s, there's one prime minister who was playing with the legalization. I'm trying to for Paul Martin. I think his name was Paul Martin, right?
Uh-huh.
So he was
Uh-huh.
playing, talking, we're gonna legalize it or whatever. He wants to legalize it, but he was caught in some corruption, and he got
Right.
kicked out as the prime minister. And then we got
Right.
conservative government. A conservative government took over after him, right? He
Yeah.
was more liberal. He was liberal. So now we got recently they kicked out this guy. He was liberal, and he's the guy who legalized it. Justin Trudeau. It's
Right.
the youngest prime minister ever. You would call him our Kennedy, right? The
Right. Right.
youngest.
Right.
So people hate it. Like he got cussed out from the people here. Like they revolted against all the the shit. What was going on even in America, like with certain things, he wasn't doing what
Yeah.
people thought he should be doing. So they fucking
Yeah.
everybody revolted against him.
It's just the nature of being a politician. There's always going to be a voting block you're never going to satisfy one way or the other.
But he
But
legalized the weed.
yeah,
He legalized the
yeah,
whole cannabis shit. And
right.
his father was the prime minister before, and his father smoked weed in the 70s. I know he smoked weed.
Mm,
The first fucking
they all
Trudeau,
did.
he was a
Yeah,
big smoker. So,
right.
anyways, it became legalized. Well, no, let me backtrack it. When it was illegal, right?
Mm,
And I can give you something heavy. They had dispensaries around, especially in the small towns more, but no
uh-huh.
one bothered them until the time of legalization coming up. And
Yeah,
they've done a big sweep, a big bust, charged all the the black market, and
hmm,
made it hard for them now that it's legal, that you can't just be in the cannabis industry in Canada if you
yeah,
had a record. But the
right.
good fuckers who was growing the good shit is from that market. It's just now they're maybe getting a little into being legal, like with the legal market, because I'll personally tell you, I don't like the shit in the dispensaries.
Oh,
I
interesting.
don't like none of the shit in the dispensaries. There's some shit they're putting in it, or some type of shit in
Well, I could speak to
it.
that for a quick second. I
Yeah,
mean,
go ahead.
here's the thing. The stuff that makes it to the shelf is the stuff that passes the test. You know what I'm saying? In other
Mm,
words, like you can grow the boofiest shit, like just like trash, but if it
mm-hmm.
passes a test, it's allowed to be on a shelf. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's the difference between like craft dinner versus like homemade mac and cheese. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like from a
yeah,
quality standpoint, right? But like, uh, you know, that's the thing I have to impress with growers and why the need for like having all of the procedures on the front end and the awareness and the understanding and the education throughout the growing process is essential is because again I have to to go back to cucumbers and tomatoes, like those don't get pulled off the shelf until enough people get sick and report it,
yeah.
right?
I see what I mean.
Right? Because what happens is with tomatoes, cucumbers, produce, and stuff, you're orally ingesting it. So when you orally ingest something, it goes into your stomach. So you have stomach acids. Let's say that there's an impurity somewhere, like a bacterial infection on some romaine lettuce. Well, it goes into your stomach. Your stomach
Yeah,
acids get a chance to go at it. It goes into your liver gets a chance at a
yeah. I
shot
see
at
what you
trying to
mean.
knock it out. Your kidneys, right? So your body has these natural filters
Yeah.
versus when you're smoking something,
Mm-hmm.
you're essentially putting fire to something and creating respirable particles.
Yeah.
And those respirable particles, depending on the size, lodge deeper and deeper in your lungs. That's why COVID
Mm,
was so effective, was because COVID was such a small particle. It was such a small viral particle. It could get into the deepest parts of your lungs, and
mm,
then it passes from the lung to the blood without getting into any of those natural filters. It bypasses
mm-hmm.
all those filters. So in pharmaceutical manufacturing, like to make a pill is
Mm-hmm.
one set of regulations. But if you wanted to make like vaccines or you wanted to make like asthma inhalers or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, that's an even higher level of operating regulations compared to pills, right?
Hmm.
So, and the thing is like a lot of what pharma and food do, it's not hard.
Yeah.
And they already wrote the book on it. In fact, there's hundreds of books on it, right? But growers don't necessarily know what direction to get pointed in. And
Hmm.
so, that's where like somebody like me, like, I mean, the company I work for, like our clients are Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson and Johnson,
Mm.
NASA, Tesla, SpaceX, Rocketdyne. Like if it flies in the air and blows shit up, it's probably made in a factory with some of our equipment. You know what I mean?
Now, is the cannabis industry?
Well, cannabis is, I mean, listen, we still have a strong foothold in the clean room marketplace. That's our bread and butter. Like 90% of the company's revenue comes from that.
Mm.
But the cannabis, here's the thing, is that the CEO and the heads of the company, they saw the writing on the wall. They're like, listen, if cannabis is going to get regulated,
Hmm.
they're not just going to let people just grow bathtub gin, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be some sort of like product safety standard. You know what I mean? The only people who don't have to meet a product safety standard are like the firearms industry and like,
Hmm.
I don't know, tobacco or something like that. You know what I mean? Like just really like awful stuff, you know?
That's why they done
So,
up here that you could grow 4 plants or more now.
yeah.
People, I
Well,
swear, they have this new thing now that they're putting out that you could
mm,
get this type of license, and it's not that much. And
mm.
I'm probably giving away a gem to even people up for even in Canada, you could grow up to 200 plants.
Wow.
See
Wow.
how
That's where it
lax
was.
it is? See how lax it is up here? Like, you know what?
Yeah.
It's good that I'm talking to you because you're, which
Yeah.
state are you in America? Which place?
I'm in Michigan. I'm like right across, I'm like
Oh,
30
you're
miles
not
from the
too far.
border.
You're not too far.
Yeah.
Okay. So they legalized recently, I think, in Detroit, right? It's
Yeah,
legal.
Michigan's been fully legal for a few years now. I've lived here for about 3 years, but I'm originally from California, from
Oh,
Los
you're
Angeles.
West Coast. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, yeah,
You're from
yeah.
the
I'm.
West Coast. So when
Oh
you talk
yeah.
about Cali Bud and shit like that,
Oh
down there,
well,
that's the best because they get to grow it.
right. Well, yeah. I mean, them in Colorado were like the first couple of states to start to like engage, and create like a space for growers to
Mm-hmm.
sell, retail. Um, but even before then, like they always said that like all of the technology and techniques were pioneered in California and moved east.
Mm.
And where I was in LA, I mean most of it was like warehouse grows where you take
Mm.
over a warehouse and build a building inside of a building. Up north, you got all of your like mountain areas and stuff
Yep.
like that, like your
Sounds
Humboldt
like
County
Canada.
area.
Sounds
Right,
like Canada. You know what they say
right.
in Canada? I don't know if you know where they say the best bud is. I'm in Ontario, the East. I'm
Okay,
telling you, I'm in the East, so I'm not far from where you at, right?
okay.
But they always say Vancouver, the other side of the country.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I know Vancouver.
BC Bud. They always say BC Bud. I try. You know what? I think I tried it a couple of times when I was like it's hard. It's rare. It's harder to get. I'm gonna say it to my people down there. They want to
Yeah,
act like they could get all this BC Bud now. You cannot get no effing BC Bud now. But we
really.
could do our own bud in Ontario. We have good enough bud in Ontario. BC
Sure.
Bud is like Colorado, the
Right,
mountains. It's like that
right.
atmosphere. So that's the West Coast. We're the
Yeah.
East, so we're kind of like Michigan. I seen a documentary on Michigan. They have some of the biggest grow grow houses right
Yeah.
now in
Oh yeah,
America.
there's facilities all over this state that are just gigantic. I
It
mean,
must be
so
changing Detroit. It must be changed that whole state right
well,
now.
yeah, the tax revenue I'm sure is playing well. I mean, they're making a pretty penny. I mean, I'd say this from a market standpoint, and this is just sort of like feet on the
Mm-hmm.
street observation is, they're battling with like some lower wholesale price per pounds and the dispensaries that buy their product don't always pay on time, and like if the dispensaries are holding the cards because like what's supposed to be net 7 payment terms turns into net 14, which turns
Mm-hmm.
into net 30, which turns into you begging for your own money, and then it turns into the dispensary going, I'm going to pay you when I'm going to pay you, or
Mm-hmm.
you can just take 20% of what I owe you and walk away. You know what I mean? Like because the grower doesn't have the money for a lawyer to sue the dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
So if the dispensaries are throwing sand in the gears of commerce, because
Mm-hmm.
that means that that the growers can't pay their taxes. If the growers can't pay their taxes, they get fined, and what do they get fined? They owe more money.
Yeah.
So it like becomes this like spiraling down the drain. So I don't know. Personally, like I mean, I'm not an expert in, state legal cannabis policy, but I can tell you that I can see, if I see a helicopter in a tree, I don't have to be a helicopter pilot to know that guy's not a good one. You know what I mean? Right? Like, I can see where some improvements could be made in like the
You know what
state.
though? Like, I know that maybe it's too deep. This is like my other podcast in me, but I know the real deal. For example, in Canada, that no matter
Mhm.
what, it will go through because of the system how it is. Like, if you really want me, I have another
Yeah.
podcast called Down to Earth Podcast, right? But
Oh,
this is the Myrie Jane podcast. But
sure,
I'm gonna
sure,
give
sure.
you this. I'm gonna give you this. What I observed up in here. I don't know if you know anything about Montreal and like
Not
Ontario. Anything
terribly
about Canada?
familiar, so
Okay.
yeah, school me,
So
school me.
when people think of Canada, you think of this nice, cherry pie place. Every Canadian is nice, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the nice snowy
yeah,
Christmas and
yeah,
shit like that. But it's the
yeah,
most
yeah.
gangster motherfucking place. It's the most gangster place. If I don't know if you watch other podcasts or any
Right.
content on YouTube, but I'm gonna direct you to
Wow.
this. This is how the weak shit is run, and it's
Really?
straight to the thing. I'm gonna go to it. It's organized
Wow.
crime. Organized crime been running the shit, and then
Right, right.
it's with the government.
Like plaid pimp suits and shit. Like, I mean,
They run. No. I'm talking like you want it like mafia and
oh,
hells
really? Like,
and
oh,
and
like
the
real,
hells,
like, yeah.
real
Oh,
shit for
yeah. I
years,
mean,
right? Like so.
every industry's got their bad actors. I
Mhm.
mean, right? There's not a lot, and cannabis is not known for honorable people, and I like to see, like, that's why I like meeting people like
Yeah,
yourself and others in the
yeah,
industry that I've built connections with, because it's like there's too few people that are like, you know, a rising tide raises all boats,
yeah.
as
Because
they say.
when it was so called illegal, right?
Yeah,
There was
right.
so much places, what you call dispensaries, open all over Ontario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Hundreds, if not maybe over
right,
the thousand, whatever, 1,000 or so more, right?
right,
And they were
right.
making a lot of money for at least 3 years. They left them alone. I remember
Really,
going
yeah,
into them, these illegal dispensaries, for at
yeah.
least 3 years. They would be packed, and no law enforcement, no authority bothered.
I'll say this, like, I mean, I know no legal system in any country is like 100%, effective and awesome and honest, but I will say that the vibe we get here in the States is that Canadian law enforcement is more about justice, where like American law enforcement is more about maintaining order.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
It's
know what I
true.
mean? Like I mean, a lot of like the way policing is done is like, post antebellum, like post slavery era. Okay, we
Yeah,
can't enslave them anymore, but we can certainly like, hassle the shit out of them. You
exactly.
know, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
You
And
know what?
like,
You explained something really good without knowing. I heard like until recently. I just recently clarified it that how they work down here. They don't just come to get you, even if you have
right,
a lot of shit on you. They tell you they're coming. So
right,
they introduce themselves.
right.
It's like they give you a chance to whatever, and they
They
might
let you pack.
reintroduce. Yes,
Right,
and they wait for you to build up whatever shit until they just come. So
right,
they're telling you back in the day they'll say, "We know you, what you're
hmm,
doing, right?"
right.
So it gives you
Wow.
time to start like a chance. Are
Yeah,
you gonna stop? So 5 months come and you're still doing it. Okay, that's
yeah.
our time now. It's like the
Well,
go.
that's yeah. That's I mean, listen, we have private prison industry here. So the law enforcement is incentivized to fill the prisons because, like, in fact, actually, I don't know if this is 100% true, but this is what I had learned sometime a while ago, was that when certain, like, private prisons, corporate
Hmm.
prisons, sign contracts with certain municipalities,
Yeah.
that there's clauses in the contract that have not just like that have minimums. So in other words, if you don't apprehend and process and sentence X number of people in your locale, then
Oh,
you owe us way more money. They put a clause in there. You know what I
damn.
mean?
That's the
Yeah,
politics.
and
That's the
it's awful.
politics.
Right, right. And so, that's why I love that, a federal legalization. I'm not necessarily I'm on the fence about it because it comes with some implications, right? Because like
Mm.
for instance, who manages the regulatory side of it, right? Would that be the FDA? Would it be our agriculture
Mm.
offices? Like, what do those look like, right? And not only that, but like, I mean,
You
there's
know what
this
it is?
time.
You know what
Hmm,
the difference? You remember with liquor, what happened? I know
yeah,
the documentary with Al Capone. It was
right.
when there was prohibition in America up here. That's where they were getting the fucking wine and liquor from. It wasn't
Yeah.
like that up here. So that's what I see that's going on right now,
Yeah.
right? So up
There's there.
here is
Hmm.
federal, what you say, but how they
Yeah.
manage it is like the liquor. You know, that's how they do
Right.
it up here. The same way the
Yeah.
liquor is legal, they have the stores, like what you say, the dispensaries, but it's in a
Right.
it's everywhere commercially.
See, it's funny you should say that because like if I was going to like suggest a change for Michigan's market, for example, like when it comes to alcohol sales in Michigan, there's like a
Mhm.
minimum price. You
Yes.
can't charge below X dollar, right?
Yeah.
So, the fact of the matter is that the dispensaries are able to like because the growers don't necessarily talk to each other and talk about
Mhm.
what their pound price per pound is. So it's
Yeah.
real easy for like some dispensary guy to be like, "What you want? Like 2,500 for that, 2,000 for that, whatever. I can get the same stuff for 1,500." And they go, "Okay, 1,500." And then
Mhm.
the next guy comes along, he's like, "I could get this for like 1,200," and it's this like circling of the drain. But
Mhm.
if there was a minimum pricing, I mean, again, I don't know the full ins and outs of this, so I could stand to be corrected, but it just seems to me that if there's a minimum price, the industry is secure, everybody gets their money, and then the competition comes down to like who can grow the best genetic expressions, right? Like who
Mhm.
makes the best like sleepy time weed, who makes the best
Mhm.
like candy tasting weed, who makes the best like in other words, like the differentiator comes down to quality, and the craftsmanship goes back into the industry versus just churning out volume.
So if we're talking about that, like what you're saying, right? Cannabis is a culture,
Right.
like how people would say music or art is a culture. So
Sure.
in the cannabis culture, everybody has their experiences, but it's not just the weed, the herbs or the marijuana or the weed. It's
Hmm.
who's talk like, having the conversation to have and analyzing it, and like what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to know that it's not just weed, it has to be the knowledge and education what makes
Hmm.
people want to consume or
Right.
use this plant for medical purposes to help them.
Well,
Because
right, and that's
if it's not for anybody but the government, if you're going to rely on the government to educate you,
oh no, forget it.
you're fucked. Because
Yeah.
what they were saying, this is what I find funny, and I have conversations once in a while with some people about this. It's funny
Oh,
how things switch, how they use the media. When I
right.
was growing up, right, even though they talked about weed bad, like,
Mhm.
all the time, when it became close to legalization, just say maybe 20 years before legalization, I'm talking like the 90s, they were
Mhm.
always saying how weed was good for all these medical purposes, for
Sure.
eating problems, all types of sicknesses. They
Right.
were promoting it like how it was so, it does all these things up into the 2000s, helps with cancer, blah, blah, blah,
Glaucoma. Right. Right.
right?
Right.
So they legalize it. But then I start hearing this American propaganda of how it does this and that. I still see the shit, the propaganda, because I'm talking to you coming from Canada, what
Yeah.
sees more American media is the biggest shit all around the world. Like it or not,
Well,
that
I
it's
mean,
like the
listen. Here's the deal. I mean, you have. I think the easiest answer, or the easiest, the Occam's razor version of it, is that
mm,
there are money interests that have something else going on
mm,
that cannabis is getting in the way of, right? So, for
yes,
instance, like the big wave of reefer madness prohibition in
mm,
the 1930s, right?
yeah,
Was largely due to newspapers that were owned by William Randolph Hearst. and
Mm-hmm.
Hearst Publication. In fact, Hearst Publications is
Mm.
still around today as a
Yeah.
magazine publisher.
Yeah.
Um, but William Randolph Hearst, because he was a newspaper publisher, he had interest in lumber and timber. Like
Ah.
he owned a lot of forest land for cutting down trees to make paper, right?
Okay.
Because you want to vertically integrate, right? Why
Integrate.
pay
Yeah.
someone else for paper if I'm a newspaper publisher?
Mm-hmm.
So what did he do with his paper? He ran all these reefer madness, propaganda pieces, and basically convinced the population that marijuana was bad, right? Well, I mean, and then you had the counterculture movement,
Mm-hmm.
and like all those hippies in the '70s were smoking weed and stuff like that, but they became the parents of the '80s
Mm-hmm.
who had us,
Yeah.
right? Right? And so what was really big then was DARE, right? In the United States, we had the DARE program, which was,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember what it stood for, but it was basically like an education program to teach kids about like drug use, and they lumped marijuana in with all of the
Mm-hmm.
heroines and the this and the that.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy here, but maybe we create a society where everybody has what they need and they don't feel compelled to do drugs to like drown out their problems.
Mm-hmm.
What do I mean? What do I know, right?
Yeah.
Right, but that being said, working with what we have, like then it was the "Just Say No" campaign from Nancy
Mm-hmm.
Reagan in the
Mm-hmm.
1980s, right? So I mean, it goes in these waves, right, of like
Mm-hmm.
acceptance and what have you. But you also have to remember that, like, here in the United States, like, I want to say like the average age of a congressperson is like somewhere in the 70s. They're all 70
Mm.
years old. They're all boomers.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So from that standpoint, it's like they are wildly out of touch. Our politicians do not represent our needs as a people in general,
Mm-hmm.
and they're wildly out of touch with like things like cost of living, like rent. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they came from the era where like even we came from the era where you could have a store that sold VCRs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like and you would be able to own a house, raise two
Mm-hmm.
kids, send them to
Yeah.
college, vacation once a
Mm-hmm.
year, two cars, mom didn't have to work. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? That all changed. They were like, yeah, F all that, man. Put those ladies to work. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
and because it's like here in the United States, for example, like the wages like that employees make have not caught up with costs. So
Oh.
cost has been going like this. Wages have been going like have stayed the same for
Mm-hmm.
like the last like 20 years or some
That's
madness like
bad.
that. So yeah. So anyway, but all that to say that that's where certain municipalities are actually saved by this. Like there are governments that are saved by this. There's a town in California called Adelanto, California,
Mm-hmm.
and Adelanto, California, it's in the middle of the desert. Um, they the main revenue source for the entire city was a military base that was nearby.
Shit.
Right, so everybody worked on the base. They were contractors. They were the
That's the
local grocery
communities.
store. The community surrounding the military base. The military
Yeah.
base closes down. Adelanto is
Oh.
decimated. Their economic bases just pulled the rug right out from under them. So what did they do? They started opening up licenses to build cultivation facilities.
Oh.
And so they ended up like effectively putting a huge amount of tax revenue that made up for the shortfall from the closed military base.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, granted, again, every government has its level of bad actors in it, and I'm sure there's been controversies around this, that, and backdoor deals and what have yous. But
Yeah.
high level, Adelanto turned into this town that was like that's now rooted in the cannabis industry.
See,
You know,
a lot of
so
I don't know if there's a trend, but I'm gonna say this though, right? When we're talking, as we were talking before with the drug stuff, what
mm,
you're saying, how strict it is in America. Um, I noticed the states what became legalized first are the ones what
mhm.
had the biggest drug problems. Correct me if I'm wrong. Colorado, I think before the cannabis industry fully took off, had a big drug problem,
Well,
right?
I think we need to define like drug problem
Or
because like when I hear,
whatever they
yeah,
were
yeah,
classified, they had said it
well,
was a high rate.
I mean, I would say this, like
I'm
I
just
would
putting it.
call it,
These
I understand
the
what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, no. You're not wrong. Like I would give you that for California in the sense of like, I mean, because here's the thing, like marijuana has always been lumped in with heroin. You
Hmm.
know, so in the drug classification hierarchy,
Hmm.
they have cannabis listed as a Schedule One drug, and
Yes.
Schedule One drugs are drugs that have no medicinal or research value,
Yeah.
right? So that's why they've been talking about moving it to Schedule Three.
Yeah.
So that a bunch of research would now how the business side of it would work is a totally different conversation, and I'm not
Hmm.
an expert on it, and nobody really knows how it's going to pan out.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you know, uh, what was I saying oh God, my train of thought got
Schedule
derailed.
one. This.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it became a Schedule One drug, but the states have the ability to make their own laws.
Hmm.
So we have like a federal jurisdiction over the entire country, but then it's sort of like provincial. You know what I mean? Like every
Hmm. Yeah.
province can make their own
Yeah.
their own legislation, right?
Hmm.
There's some supremacy clauses involved, I'm sure, where like Fed supersedes province, and much
Hmm.
like Fed supersedes state here, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
But like by and large, like the states could just be perfectly left alone and deal with the problems themselves. As far as the hard drugs go, as like I classify hard drugs as more like heroin, speed, like
Hmm.
methamphetamines, cocaine, those
That's what
cartel
I'm
type
saying.
drugs, right?
That city, Colorado, they said had a high rate of that before they legalized marijuana. And Vancouver in Canada, I don't know if you ever heard. Maybe you look this up on
Yeah,
YouTube. I forgot the
yeah.
name of the place. It's the highest. I never knew this till like maybe what 15 years ago. I was surprised, or maybe 20 years ago, that Vancouver has the highest. There's this place in Vancouver City where it has the highest drug rate in
Wow.
all of North America.
Right. Right. Wow.
I have to look the name up. I forgot the name of the place, but this place is like you see how they have that place in LA, like the Skid or what's that
Skid Row.
place?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Skid Row.
this
Yeah.
is like even a mega thing.
Wow.
Like work
Yeah.
like and you would think this is Canada. That's what I'm giving you.
Yeah.
You
I
don't
know. I
even
know.
know
I
this.
know.
This is
Yeah.
Vancouver, somewhere in Vancouver,
That
and
is
it's like
shocking to hear, actually.
yeah, and that's why weed was nothing for years because
Right.
there's a big meth problem. There's a big
Yeah.
all of that what you just mentioned
Well,
problem down there.
that and they've never really had a paper bag law here in the country in the United States. And like what I mean by that is like in certain cities, like in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
when I was growing up in Los Angeles, that like you're not allowed to drink alcohol in public. But
Mhm.
if you put it in a paper bag and
You
you
could
were
drink.
drinking it, you could kind of drink it, and it gives the cops the excuse to look the
Yeah.
other way,
Yes. I heard that
right?
before up here too. Yeah.
Right. So there's no paper bag law with regards to cannabis at this point. But I mean, ultimately though, it's like all the politics aside, this stuff still has to get grown. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
and you have to make sure that it's legally it could
Right.
be
That it's compliant. You
yeah,
know?
and that's very
I mean,
important.
yeah, like here, I'll show you something actually. Check this out.
Yeah.
I'll show you this device here. This is called a particle counter. Let
Mm.
me turn it on, and I'll let the splash screen warm up here. Give me a
Yeah,
second.
man.
Um, so what this is designed to do is this is a device that clean rooms use in order to
Mm.
like monitor the air quality within the room. And
Okay.
so and clean rooms have to be a very specific standard. Whatever they're claiming to be, they have to be able to prove that they are at that level, right?
Hmm.
Because like you're basically factoring for your smallest particle threat, right?
Hmm.
So like in cannabis, for example, mold spores are the smallest airborne particle threat that they have to worry about. Like
Hmm.
bacteria travels on dust. Bacteria doesn't travel very well in air. Virus is more often touch transmitted, just like bacteria. So
Hmm.
mold spores are what they really care about. The smallest mold spore you need to be concerned about is 2 microns and larger. So I would say 1 micron and up, right? And so
Hmm.
what this device does is, can you see it here?
Yep.
Is you can see here what it's looking at is it's looking at 10 micron particles, 5
Hmm.
micron particles, 2.5, 1, 0.5s, 0.3s. Point
Yeah.
fives and point threes are more like people problems, like stuff that
Hmm.
health and safety people would have something to say about. But from a pathogen standpoint, one
Hmm.
micron and larger. So when I hit this button here, what I'll do is it'll start taking air in through this inlet, and it
Hmm.
passes it through a laser. It sizes it, it counts it, and it starts to give you a numerical value of what the particles in the air that are it's pulling in through the inlet.
Oh,
And
this
you
is
so you can
something.
right like so you're in a room right now where like you can see your smoke from your joint
Yeah,
because it's together enough to be able to see it. But as it dissipates into the air, you can't
yeah, I
see
see
it
what I mean.
anymore, but you can see it with instrumentation. So like watch, like if I take like a vape pen for example, and I
Mm.
blow it over the top here, you'll see the numbers jump. Watch, hold on a
That
second.
be, yeah,
Hold on. Is this dead? That's dead. Hold on, let me find one that's got a battery on it. Check this out.
that'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Mm. So here we go. I'll blow it over the top and see how the numbers get bigger?
Yep, yep. It's
You
moving.
know? Right.
Mm.
So excuse me. So yeah, I mean this is a device that like you could use in a cannabis facility to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how much like what you call the soup of your air. So
That's very
for
important.
instance right, so the soup of your air is like how many particles are in like when you're thinking of the
Mm-hmm.
analogy of soup, you want air that's more like chicken broth versus like beef stew. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Right? So you can actually measure this and you can start to find hot spots around your facility where there's a
Mm-hmm.
higher level of particles,
Yeah.
and that tells you one, you need to start figuring out a way to get rid of them, like a filter unit.
Yeah.
Or number two, you also need to figure out what the source of those particles are, right? Do you have a crack in the wall that's like pulling
Mm.
air in from like, and it's pulling dust in from inside the wall? Is there a mold outbreak in the room? That type of thing.
This is very
So
important.
yeah, so it's definitely something that growers would benefit from. Here, I'll show you this other one
Not
here. This
just
one's
growers, anybody who's living
well,
right now. Like in my
yeah,
place, there's filter. I got a filter on every floor. You know the
right.
air filters. It's
Uh-huh,
good to
uh-huh.
have a good quality air filters. My parents don't
Right.
even have an air filter in their house, and it's old.
Right.
You get what I mean? Like I have an air filter every floor.
So this device, this is called an air sampler. Here, and I'll turn
Mm,
it on. And so what you do is you can, let me take the top off, and you can take the top off of here, the sampling head, and where's my
mm.
camera? If you notice, there's a bunch of holes right there.
Yep, I see it.
Okay,
I see
so
it.
you put a petri dish in here,
Hmm.
and then you close the cover, and then hold on a second. You close the cover. There you go, and then you hit start.
Yep.
And what it does is it starts to pull air onto the petri dish at a
Oh.
and it's pulling it at a very specific speed for a very
Hmm.
specific amount of time. So that way you have like apples to apples comparisons when you're sampling your air. And
Yeah.
so if you can take that petri dish and you send it to a lab, right?
Mm.
The lab can culture it out, and what they can tell you is like they can grow it out and they can tell you what species are present in your air. So you could you could potentially catch Aspergillus niger in your air, or Aspergillus flavus or Aspergillus terreus.
Hmm.
You can catch all that in your air before you ever see it on a plant.
Damn.
And now you start to have like some more options for how you get rid of it. And not only that, but like if you know what species it is, you can start to trace it back to things that might be causing it. Like for instance, like there's a lot of growers that grow in cocoa, right?
Yeah.
And cocoa is a lot of it, they say it's triple washed, right? But what's it triple washed with, right? Ocean water, sewer water. It's not reverse osmosis, UV filtered water. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's all that cocoa and coir comes from like Bangladesh and
Yeah.
India, and facilities where shoes are optional, and it's taken on a tuk tuk.
Yeah.
It's like taken on a tuk tuk to another
Hmm.
facility, and yada yada. So and then it ends up on a ship, and that ship crosses the Atlantic
It's
or the
true.
Pacific, and and that's before it even gets to the hydro store. And then think about all the people that are growing at home that are taking all of the molds and funk from their homes and going to the
Yeah.
hydro store. And then you pick up somebody else's spider mites because you went into the store after they did, and you bring
Mm.
their spider mites to your house. It's like there's it gets really meticulous, and it
Yeah,
gets
I see
very
what you mean.
detective work.
The
You
information
know?
what you're given, I
Yeah.
understand it. right?
Yeah.
I understand everything what you're saying
Right.
because I'm into the
Right.
science too. That's another thing.
Right.
I'll tell you, I love history, science,
Yeah.
all what you're saying. The knowledge help because what
Yeah.
you're telling people when they see this broadcast again, they're gonna be really listening a lot because this is good for your living, just to know
Right.
what's in your home too.
Oh
Do
yeah.
you want to
Absolutely.
do you want to grow in your home or grow outside? That's why the outside my pops like growing outside because it's away. You know what I mean? It's farm style. It's not
Yeah.
popular as much, but
Right.
he grows it outside. He likes outside shit.
Right. So everybody, the heart wants what the heart wants, right? I
Hmm.
mean, some people are trying to bang out 4 or 5 crops a year. Some people just want to plant in spring and harvest in fall.
But you still have to do some similar stuff even when it's outside.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, and even when you bring outdoor weed inside,
Yeah.
you still gotta handle it properly. I mean,
You're
like
right.
think about, if you like, let's say for example, you take your weed out of your grow in your garage, right? You set
Hmm.
up a grow tent in the garage, right?
Hmm.
And you bring it in and you want to cut it on the kitchen table and stuff,
Yep.
right? But like everybody that's like coming on and off the couches, every time they sit on the couch, like all that dust and dander and stuff is being poofed up into the air, and it's making its way around and it
Yeah,
finds
you're
its
right.
way
You're
onto
right.
the plants, and that's not even counting what people bring from their own facilities or their own homes. You know what I mean? Like, dude, I when I first started in this industry, I started as a trimmer, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, a guy gave me a trimming job, and he's like, "Hey, come, you want to make some money under the table?" I was like, "Hell yeah, let's do it." And so like I would, and then you meet other growers, right? And you pick up other trimming
Hmm.
work, right? And I was like making my full living off of just trimming all these
Hmm.
people's different spots, right? But I'd go to like 2 and 3 spots in a day. I didn't know. We didn't know then,
Yeah.
that we were like transferring risks back and forth between buildings
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff
It's
like that.
different. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, that's the thing that I think is coming for this industry here in the United States is they're going to start, and some states actually have um, started to regulate the operations side of it, not just what the quality of the final product.
I see what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
could grow under the most horrendous conditions, but if it passes a test, ta-da, money. But
Yeah.
like, you know, um, that that's not likely though. You know what I mean? Like in other words, those problems come and they sneak up on you, and then if you don't know how to do anything about it, then you're just like spreading it from room to room to room, and all your crops are dying, and then pretty soon you can't pass any tests because your entire
Hmm.
building is loaded with it.
Hmm.
So, and then you're out of business. So all I'm saying is like I'm about trying to keep growers successful. And it doesn't necessarily, I mean, equipment is like one part of the equation, right?
Hmm.
Equipment helps, but it's like it comes down to also like keeping an eye on the maintenance of your building,
Yep.
or like knowing what your building was before you moved in. Was your building a
Hmm.
dog food factory? Was it a bread
Hmm.
factory before you moved in? Those buildings have problems in them.
You know what?
Like,
You're right. I seen
yeah, when I
factories. I worked in a factory where trans got rid of everything to sell. I guess the owners wanted sold it to a cannabis company, so
right.
they got rid of everything. So they would have to do it like what you're saying with some type of filtration and cleaning.
Right.
They're not just
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
take it
I
over
tell
like that.
growers all the time. I'm like, okay, if I was in your shoes and I was like looking at buildings that I was going to open up a
Mm,
commercial facility in, I would bring an air sampler with me and I would take samples of the building.
yeah,
And then if I like the location,
makes sense.
then I know what I'm moving into,
That's
right? You
good.
take those petri dishes to a lab, you have it analyzed, and let's say it comes back with a problem, right? Let's
Yeah,
say it comes back with an Aspergillus species or something
yeah.
like that, right? Well, then you can go to the realtor that you're trying to get the building from and go, well, wait a second, I like the location,
Mm.
but I'm buying problems. I'm
Yeah,
buying a
because you're gonna
building
have
with
to
a
pay
known.
more. You're gonna have to pay
Right,
more
right,
to do all
right. To
the stuff.
remediate it, so
Yeah,
knock down the price. You know what I mean? Like
makes
so,
sense. Makes
yeah.
sense.
You know what else I would do? I would also use the same device. Like, okay, so let's say you get the building, right? And
Hmm.
you build out and you're getting ready to cut the ribbon and start growing on day
Yep.
one, right? I'd go 2 weeks before that.
Hmm.
I would, maybe 3 weeks before that, I'd take this air sampler after all of the construction people and contractors have left, and I would test air sample every part of the building I could, and then send those off because two things are going to happen. One, if you find any problems, you have an opportunity to get them out before you move plants in, right?
Yeah.
Because once you
Yep.
start growing on top of a problem, you're never going to get rid of it,
Hmm.
right? And then the second thing is that it also baselines the building. So what I mean by baselining is that like it gives you what the microbial load of the building and the cleanliness level of the building was
Hmm.
like before plants ever moved in,
Yeah.
and now you have some cleaning targets
Yes.
that you to get to. You're like, okay, well, we want to at least be as close to what the building was like without plants as possible.
Hmm. You're
You
right.
know, but a lot of growers don't know to like take air samples. I
No, you
mean,
have to
it's
do
not.
that. That's a must.
Yeah. Oh,
That should be the
absolutely.
main
Well,
thing.
I mean, you know, by Canadian standards, yeah, they should be doing it like gangbusters because I mean that's part of good manufacturing practices,
Hmm.
is doing like routine microbiological sampling within your facility. You know, cracker factories do it. You know, pill factories do it. Like every few months or whatever, they go through and they swab and they air sample and they test their water and they test their,
Hmm.
you know, their wastewaters and you know, cut off pieces of their air conditioning filter to
Yep.
find out what's
Yep.
getting caught in it, you know, stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So, like, I'm just coming from like the whole thing of like knowledge is power
You're right.
because when I like it breaks my heart to see a grower like freaking out over a mold problem. Because
Hmm.
now it's easy for me to be distant from it because I'm not emotionally or financially connected to their grow.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can be more of like just a voice of calm and reason. But like you know, again, mainstream manufacturing deals with these problems all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's bacteria outbreaks at like factories all the fucking time. So it's like, why not just do what they do,
Hmm.
right? And so, but unfortunately, sometimes that means you got to do a little bit more work. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Because you have to write all those standard operating procedures and you have to like watch your processes and see like you know make sure that no cross contamination is taking place and you know you instead of one broom for the entire facility, right, you buy like every room has their own broom.
So you know what that shows me, that what's very important for a facility, for cannabis especially, and food,
Yeah.
is you have
Yeah.
to have a maintenance crew, people who are
Oh yeah.
cleaning all the time. You
Well,
have to have
right.
a
And
staff.
think about it this way though, but this is the crazy part about this is like at least here in the United States, like cleaning is viewed as bitch work.
Mm-hmm.
Just straight up, it's like you know you're handing your cleaning to people who are not who think they're not being paid enough to do it
Mm-hmm.
and don't really understand what clean is.
I know
You
what
know
you
what I
mean.
mean? So, in other words, I could go to your facility and you could say, clean my flower room. And I could just go take a bottle of bleach and I could just pour it in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
And you're going to walk in 2 hours later and you're going to be like, oh man, yeah, it smells really clean in
Mm.
here.
Yeah.
You know? And you don't know. You don't know
Yeah.
what clean is, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, by the way, like a lot of disinfectant manufacturers put fragrance in their product as a
Yeah.
marketing trick, right?
Yeah.
That's why Pine Sol smells like pine, right?
Mm.
When you smell pine, you think of, when you're in the forest and you smell
Yeah.
pine trees, you're thinking of you know mopping your floors, right?
Mm.
So that's floors, incidentally, that are made out of the dead of their relatives, but that's a whole other
Mm.
story. Um, but anyway, but you're handing cleaning off to somebody who doesn't give a shit and doesn't think they're
Yeah.
paid enough and doesn't really know what it looks like.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So that's where I teach a lot of growers. I'm like, you know, and especially what happens is like a lot of growers will use the term clean, sanitize, disinfect, and sterile. They
Mm.
kind of use those four terms interchangeably, and they actually have like each one of those four have very distinct meanings. Like in food facilities and pharma
Mm.
facilities, like clean is just the removal of surface dirt. Sanitizing is just making sure bacteria levels are safe,
Mm.
that they're
Yeah.
controlled, right?
Yeah.
Disinfection is getting rid of mold spores and virus and bacteria and their spores.
Mm.
And sterile is the tippy top of the game. Sterile means that there is nothing, like let's say you put like a scalpel in an autoclave, right?
Mm.
Like sterile means there is no particles or microbes left on a surface, and there's no corpses and there's no
Mm.
biofilm. There's
Mm-hmm.
literally nothing. And
That's perfect.
sterile is hard to achieve. It requires a lot of heat, or it requires like really really harsh chemicals. And to go back to something you mentioned earlier, like you were talking about like how sometimes like dispensary weed isn't good, and a lot of it is because, and I just know this from talking to other Canadian growers, that there's like businesses that what they'll do is they'll buy like a rad source machine.
Mm.
Like, are you familiar with rad source or like X-rays? Okay, so there's a whole like kind of market in cannabis for remediation equipment. So meaning that like um, they have co-opted equipment from like the medical industry, right?
Ah, I see
So
what you're saying, bro.
so there are these gigantic devices like there's a few of them out there, like Willow is a manufacturer of something like that. Uh, uh, Rad Source is another one. And so what they do is somebody buys a machine, right? And then they just like have growers bring their product to them and run it through this machine,
Mm.
and it irradiates the weed.
Ah, yes, because that's what
So
they do with food.
right. So, well, I mean, okay, so here's the thing. I just, to kind of equate the concept, like the concept is cool, but the application is not quite right. But
Mm.
because think of it like this, like most food that's manufactured has a kill step in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, beer is brewed and pasteurized, right?
Yeah.
Um, spaghetti sauce is heated, right? That's why,
Mm-hmm.
like, when you buy spaghetti sauce and you take the top off, it makes that suction. What they
Yep.
do is they heat the bottle, they heat the cap, or no, they heat the bottle. But in order to sterilize or sanitize the inside of the cap, they turn the bottle upside down the
Oh, the heating.
during the menu as it goes down the line, and
Okay.
the temperature of the spaghetti sauce is supposed to be enough to sanitize the inside of the cap, and then when it turns back over and the
Mm.
product, gravity pulls the product down to the bottom of the jar, that air becomes vacuum.
Yeah, I
That's
see
why
what you
you get
mean.
that popping sound every
Popping
time you
sound.
take. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, neither here nor there. But
Yeah.
point is that they have a regulated way in which they operate, and so um, I mean I'm thinking the next phase of the industry here in the United States is that they might start holding operations to like they might start regulating how you operate.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, here in Michigan, like if you want to manufacture edibles, you
Mm-hmm.
have to adhere to something called 21 CFR Part 117. And you're like, what is that? At
Yeah.
21 CFR Part 117. That is the Code of Federal Regulations, Part
Mm.
21 of the Code of Federal Regulation, or Chapter 21, Part 117. 117 is the manufacturing standards for human food. So
Oh.
that's the those are the regulations that you would be held to. New York, for example, recently built 21 CFR 117 into their regulations. So, in other words, when like an auditor shows up at their facility, they're running them through an audit that's like close to a cracker factory.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty darn close. Close enough that like it would be in your best interest to operate at that level so that way when the auditor shows up, they're like, "Oh, cool. You guys are all under control. Okay, see you in a couple months or see you next year or
Yeah.
whatever," right? You don't want that auditor anywhere near anything. You want to find
Mm.
every problem in your building. You want to find every problem in your building on your own because if an auditor comes in and finds it, you
Yeah.
not only go on the record for like, you know, not maintaining good practices.
Mm-hmm.
There's likely a fine associated with it, so now you're paying out of pocket, right? How
Mm-hmm.
pissed is like your accountant going to be? And not only that, but you have to have the repair done or the retrofit done within a
Mm.
specific amount of time.
Yeah.
Which now, if you don't have that money, like
They shut
how
you
you
down.
right, then they come back and they're like, "Oh, you didn't fix this? Oh, well, that's a second offense, and a second
Mm-hmm.
offense carries an even bigger fine."
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like it's just like Listen, it took me my entire life to figure out that if I just did my homework on Friday night, I had my weekend to myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? All throughout, I always waited till Sunday night to do my homework for school on Monday, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like, it didn't dawn on me till I was an adult. It's like, hey, and now that I have kids of my own, I'm like, if we just knock this out Friday night, I'm not gonna bug you about it. Like, it's done. Like, you get the
Mm-hmm.
whole 2 days to yourself, and they're like, whoa, really? I'm like, yeah. I can't say anything about it. The work's done. You're good. So that's all I'm saying is it's like, there's going to be a little bit of a mentality shift, you know.
But for a
Um,
fact, what this knowledge, what you put out in the universe with me right now, I know for a fact within just the cannabis community, they
yeah,
take this in because you do need in their system the proper requirements to
yeah,
make that sale as what
yeah,
you say say legally. See,
yeah.
that's
You
how
got
it
to
is
get
in
on the shelf.
Canada. That's how it is in Canada. It's legal everywhere. So and people could grow their own shit now. So it's like
Right.
how people could
Yeah.
make wine. It's the weed. Weed is like nothing up here.
Yeah.
The only thing
Yeah.
what it'll get you with is this. It's
Mm-hmm.
more illegal than before. So it's like if you sell it and you don't have a license, for
Yeah.
example, with cannabis, it's the
Yeah.
flip. They'll give you a lot of years for selling for to a minor, someone who's underage.
Well,
You could get up to
yeah.
10 years.
That's like that. I mean, that's like basically making silencers in your garage and selling them. You're like
Yeah,
selling a regulated. You're selling a regulated good, effectively black market,
yeah.
and I mean, I guess that's the thing that like a lot of growers have to grapple with is it's like, okay, yeah, you probably grow some bang and fire, but like you have to meet a minimum product safety standard if you want to sell to the
It's
general
true.
public.
It's true.
It's just that's it. I mean, and here's the other thing too is that like the cannabis industry is not prepared for recalls, and they're
Hmm.
not prepared for to get like for lawsuits, right? Because in the United States, for example, like because it's not federally legal,
Hmm.
most banks won't touch cannabis money
Oh.
because most banks, like most major banks, are FDIC insured. FDIC is Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It basically is like a if there's ever like a bank ever fails or whatever, there's an insurance policy on everybody's deposits, right? The
It makes
government backs the
So it makes
right.
sense. I don't know if you ever heard of Burner. He has cookies. He's
Yeah.
one of the biggest.
Uh-huh.
Okay, he got sued or something by some company or guy for $7 million, and they
Wow.
won. They won actually. You got what I
What did
mean?
they sue him for?
Something what you just said there aligns up with that.
Like
They
a
were just
faulty product, like bad, like they smoked bad weed or something, or
it was something, yeah, in regards to
because I can tell you this that like there's a company, there's like a multi-state operator here in the
mhm,
United States that they had a death at their facility. So apparently somebody was working in like an area where they were mass producing pre-rolls, right?
mhm.
And the particulate matter in the air overwhelmed them, and it triggered an
Mhm.
asthma attack, and
Oh.
and the person died on site before first responders could arrive, right?
Mhm.
So, but here's the thing, like that cannabis isn't legally insulated the way that other manufacturers are.
Mhm.
So, for example, because of that death, that family is now suing everybody and
Oh, I
anybody that
bet.
they can. They're
Mm.
suing, the company. They're suing the property owner. They're suing the building owner.
Everything.
They're suing the cultivation director and the
Mm.
management, the location's management. They're going to sue anybody and everybody they can to try to shake money out of this. I mean, they lost a
Mm-mm.
family member. I don't
Mm.
fault them for it.
Mm.
But what I'm saying is that like most like cannabis facilities here in the United States don't think that far ahead. And it's like if you had a particle counter and you had an air sampler, you would be able to have some sort of legal
Yeah,
defense
you're
of
right.
being able to go, well, we take regular particle counts and we take routine air samples
You're
and
right.
we didn't, if this person died of this, well, this our records indicate that
Yeah, at least you have
we've been
something.
monitoring for it. Yeah, let me put it this way. It gives you some plausible defense. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
you're right. Right.
Accidents happen, but it's not like the fire extinguishers were empty. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like that
yeah.
type of thing. So,
It makes
you
sense.
know,
It's like a fire. It's like how people have a fire, you know, detector in their house,
yeah,
or,
smoke
uh,
detector, right?
you know what I mean, like smoke detector, and what's called the other
Oh,
one?
like
Yeah,
a carbon monoxide
yeah,
detector.
carbon monoxide detector. You
Yeah,
have to have that in your house working,
yeah,
right? So no
yeah.
different than the filtration. You're right. I know my pops. He does that every and my mom does. They do that every year. They get their ducts clean and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're obsessed with that shit, cleaning
Yeah,
the filtration in the house.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right.
Well, and think about all the higher level of particulate matter that's in a cannabis facility, or even
Hmm.
just an area where you're growing,
Yeah.
right? Because like even though your cocoa is sitting still
Hmm.
in the pot, there are
Yeah.
particles that you can't see with the naked eye that are coming off of your cocoa. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that could be like when your fans are going back and forth and your plants are
Hmm.
swaying in the
Hmm.
pot. You know, it could loosen some of that dirt. But these very, very, very fine particles, like particularly more so mold spores, right? Because if mold is growing in your media and
That
it's
makes
producing
sense.
spores, those get released and then they fly about until they land on something. And if that something is at the right temperature, it's the right food source and the right level of humidity, boom, you got an outbreak, right? Like that's the part that like a lot of growers like you don't want like Papa don't want no mess when it comes to mold. You know what I
It's true.
mean? Like
That could
because
ruin
here's
your
the
crop, man.
yeah, well, because and the thing is like one mold spore
Mm.
can create 10,000 more, and those 10,000 each create 10,000 more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or well, I'll say this: it's a numbers game. You know what I mean? They release 10,000 mold spores, and of those, a certain percentage will find something that they can grow on. A certain percentage will just not be viable. They'll just be like dead spores. And then some will lay dormant because
Mm.
there's nothing to grow off of. And then your employee comes through the hallway, picks it up on their shoe, and then carries it into flower room one. And then
Ah.
somebody sweeping in flower room one kicks that particle up into the air, it lands on the plant, and now it found something that's the right temperature, the right humidity, and like a food source.
So yo, man, you want to tell the people your handles before we come off
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
episode?
Yeah, no, for sure. So you can find me on Instagram. I go by dyslexic stoner 402. I probably should have picked a Instagram handle that was easier to spell, but it was funny to me at the time. So
Yeah.
dyslexic stoner 402. I post all like mold and microbe control information. You can see where like some of my humor's a little off,
Hmm.
a little like toes the line of good taste. But again, I mean, I'm trying to give you something that
No, I
that
learned a
that
lot today from
that you
like what.
remember.
Yeah, they'll remember it. Trust me. I learned a lot, man, and you have the education in it. I want to keep in touch with you because this is
Sure.
something part of the industry. Like people could talk about weed, whatever, cannabis, whatever they're
Yeah.
talking about. But what you do as filtration, as like keeping the environment a way that people could legally make money from,
Right.
all of you guys gotta listen to the lexic stoner, like with the
Yeah.
filtration, because that's the only way you're gonna have a healthy product. You want a healthy
Yeah.
product?
I'm telling you that it's if you want to grow, if you want more confidence in your facility. That's the
Mm,
thing. Is like I really try to like help my customers not think of it in terms of mold, because
mm.
mold sounds scary.
Yeah, it
Mold
sounds scary.
it engages the ego. No grower
Yeah,
wants to talk about
yeah,
mold. No,
mold.
every
Yeah, I
grower
know.
has it, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Right.
What are you talking about? I got mold. I don't have mold. You have mold.
You're
Whatever.
right.
Get out of here with that mold shit.
It's a
You
bad
know?
word.
Right, right. So I tend to tell my customers, I'm like, it's a particle. It's a
Mm,
particle just like a dust particle, just like a
mm,
dander particle, just like a skin particle. And particles can be measured.
mm,
Particles can be identified. Particles can be removed. You
mm,
can with where air, the thing about air filtration and where I try to really give my customers peace of mind is it's like I can put this particle counter on the intake of a filter
mm,
unit and I can show particles going
mhm.
into the unit, right?
Yeah.
And then I can take that same device, put it on the output,
Yeah.
and I can take a sample and I can show you nothing is coming out. So
Hmm.
everything that is going in there is being trapped inside of there. Now,
It's worth it though.
how? Yeah, that's what I'm
Worth
saying.
it.
I
If
mean,
you're doing that
right.
business, I'm gonna say this right now. The Myrie Jane podcast, if you're doing that business and you want your business to last long and know that it has this quality, because what
Yeah,
he's telling you guys, it's gonna really bring that quality. If you want that quality, what you call weed or that
right.
cannabis, that sticky, icky, that shit, what you're taking in yourself, but it's more clean. You need somebody like him, the Lexic Stoner,
I'm
420,
telling
right?
you, 402, 402. Yeah,
402,
yeah. No, I mean,
402.
and that's what I'm saying though. Is it's like everybody cares about their product, right? I mean, there's people that don't, but more or less, most people they care about what goes into their plants.
Mm,
And what can go into their plants is not just nutrients. What can go into their plants is what is in the environment.
mm,
And so, I get a lot of growers want to put their heart and soul into it. And
mm,
the good news is that you don't have to be scared of mold. You can get control over it, and there's a
mm.
way to do it. And some of
Yeah.
it is equipment, some of it is knowledge. And I am down to have a conversation. If you find me on LinkedIn, I'm under Jason Hadley
Yeah,
on
man.
LinkedIn. Um, I'm old. I don't
Yeah,
do a
man,
lot
we're
of
good,
socials.
man. I got
So
you, man. Please
it's just
subscribe.
LinkedIn and Instagram, but I have
Man,
a
we
lot of
got you,
fun with it.
man. I
Yeah.
got you,
So
man.
I say this, and I'll just put this one offer out. Like, if anybody that's listening, watching this, or whatever, ever has any questions, feel free to hit me up. You can also reach out to me at my email address. That's jhadley. That's the letter J,
Hmm.
HADLEY at lwshealthandsafety.com. I'm always down to have a conversation, man. I come from the school of thought of like, help
Hmm.
everybody and the money will be there. You
That's
know
how
what I
I
mean?
am. Glad to meet you, man. Much
Thank
respect
you,
for coming
Sean.
on the Myrie Jane podcast. And you're gonna see the highlights, yo. Please
Thank
subscribe.
you.
Respect.